Today I'm going to talk about composite functions. Composite functions are when you apply one function to the results of another function. You can even compose a function onto itself. Okay, so let's look at this problem. We have f of x equals 2x plus 1 and g of x equals x minus 1. And we want to find f of gx in our first section. Fx can be written as f, the parentheses, gx. So what happens? What do we do? Now we know f of x is 2x plus 1. But now our x became g of x. So all our x terms in our f of x become g of x. So my f of x is 2x plus 1. Now my x becomes x minus 1. And I'm left with that plus 1. Simplify using our distributive property. 2 times x gives me 2x. 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2. And I'm going to bring down my plus 1. Simplify. That gives me 2x minus 1. That's our f of gx. What about my g of fx? Once again, I can rewrite it as g of fx. And I like to write it in this form because it's a little bit more intuitive. Here now our g of x and the x in the g of x became f of x. So my g of x is x minus 1, but the x now became 2x plus 1 in that x here minus 1 from this minus 1. That gives me 2x and 1 minus 1 gives me 0. So that's my g of f of x. Now, what's this 2 over here? G of f of 2 is when you change your x. So if g of f of x is 2x, therefore it is 2 times 2, 4. And that's how we solve these problems. Let's now try a problem with a quadratic equation and some fractions. You guys love fractions. So we're going to find f of gx, which I'm going to rewrite as f of. So I'm going to take my f of x function and change all my x's to my g of x. So my x in my x squared now becomes x minus 2 squared plus 2. Again, my x becomes x minus 2 plus 1. Simplify. Let's do our distributive property. And then 2 times x gives me 2x. 2 times negative 2 gives me negative 4 plus 1. Let's use my FOIL-ish method. So x times x gives me x squared. X times negative 2 gives me negative 2x. X times negative 2 gives me negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative 2 gives me a positive 4. Bring down my 2x. Negative 4 plus 1 gives me negative 3. Let's simplify. I'm left with x squared. These two cancel out. So I have negative 2x and plus 1. That is my f of gx. But we're not done yet. We need to find f of g half. To plug in our half into every x that you see. F half squared minus 2 times half plus 1. Half times half gives me 1 over 4. 2 times half gives me, well, there's a negative, so that's a negative 1 plus 1. These two cancel out, and I'm left with 1 over 4. Let's do the next portion. So g of fx can be written as g f of x. So we're going to take our function x minus 2. Now all our x's now become f of x, the function f of x. Our x minus 2 becomes x squared plus x plus 1 from my f of x minus 2. Simplify. X squared plus minus 1. But again, we're not done yet because we need to find g of f negative 2. So now my x's all become negative 2. So I have x squared, which now becomes negative 2 squared plus 2 times negative 2 minus 1. Simplify. Negative 2 times negative 2 gives me a positive 4. Negative 2 times 2 gives me a negative 4 minus 1. These cancel out. and I'm left with -1 as my final answer. What if I have a radical now? The method is still the same. Let's find g of f5. Let's do g of fx first. That can be written as g of fx. So I'm going to look at my g of x, which is 4x squared minus 6, but every x term in my g of x becomes my f of x. So I have 4. Now my x becomes square root 3x minus 5. Square remains minus 6. Simplify. The square and the square root cancel each other out. So I'm left with 4 into 3x minus 5. You see, it becomes very simple. Don't freeze when you see something that you're not familiar with. The method is the same all the time. Use the distributive property, so it becomes 12x minus 20 minus 6, which equals 12x minus 26. We have to find g of f5. So I have to plug in my 5 into my x. So my 12 now becomes x becomes 5 minus 26. That gives me 60 minus 26, 34. And that's how we solve that. As you can see, for every single example I use, they look very different, but the method to solve it is exactly the same. Let's do one final example using negative numbers. We're going to find f of gx, which I'm going to write as f of gx. So the x in my f of x becomes my g of x function. All right, -6. My x now became -2x minus 4 and plus 5 from here. Simplify. Distributive. -6 times -2x gives me a positive 12x plus double negative. 6 times 4 is 24 plus 5. That gives me 12x plus 29. What about my g of fx? G into my f of x. So my function is g, so it's -2. My x now became -6x plus 5, and I have that -4. Simplify. -2 times -6x gives me positive 12x. -2 times 5 gives me -10, and this -4 comes from here. Simplify, that gives me 12x minus 14. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I offer notes, lessons, worksheets with full answer keys for sale, as well as online tutoring. Links below. And if you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon account as well. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you found this lesson helpful.